So Frozen Planet 2 is the sequel to Frozen Planet. It came out in 2022. So obviously Frozen Planet dealt with animals in the Arctic and the Antarctic. This series branches out a bit more. Of the three series that's had a sequel, Frozen Planet, Blue Planet and Planet Earth, Frozen Planet's the one that has a very strong narrative. I think if this series had followed that narrative structure, it would have felt very repetitive, and I don't think it would have worked as well. So I think it's a good idea that they branched out. And this episode is ultimately kind of the intro episode. So the first major bit of footage here are the Emperor Penguins. In Frozen Planet we'd always start in the Arctic. Here we start in the Antarctic again. It shows this is a very different series from Frozen Planet. The Emperor Penguins are a good animal to start with because they're one of the most iconic. Apart from polar bears, they're the most iconic polar animal, and they're one of the animals that we've seen the most in other series. And what I liked about this sequence is it doesn't actually copy other series, because most sequences that deal with emperor penguins are all to do with them huddling for warmth in the winter, looking after the eggs and then passing the chicks over once they hatch to the female. This sequence does not do that. This focuses on the period after that. We see the chicks, they're getting older, and the parents basically leave them, and they've got to make their own way. They've got to get to the water, which obviously involves them travelling quite a distance to get there, and basically going out to sea to feed. And what I like about it is different. And on a narrative level, it almost works as an epilogue to all those other sequences, because this is the aftermath of that, which I think is really good, because again, it doesn't retread familiar water, it shows an animal we've seen many times before, and I think this is the only time we see emperor penguins in the series. I don't remember them popping up again. I think it's a really smart thing to do, because it kind of subverts people's expectations, because again, you kind of assume the same emperor penguin sequence is going to be shown. It doesn't do that, it shows a very different sequence, which I think is very good. Then we go into a sequence that we have seen before, and that is the orcas wave-washing seals. This was obviously one of the most iconic sequences in the first Frozen Planet. I think it was my highlight of the series if I remember correctly. It is a great sequence, it's held up very well, and this sequence does a lot to expand on that. So this sequence does pop up later in the series, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much because we will explore it more there, but it's very good. It's very good at showing you how clever the orcas are, then breaking the ice to get the seal out of the water. It was really good because the first time we saw this way back in Frozen Planet was very much showing you the orcas as the villains. They were very much sadistically playing with the seal. This focuses more on how clever that behaviour is, because you do get a sense of that in Frozen Planet, but this makes it the point, because again it focuses more on the strategy that the orcas have, and it is really good. You don't really feel as bad for the seal as you did in Frozen Planet, but you do kind of feel bad for it, and it is a very good sequence. Then we move further north, we explore the mountains because we're going to see more of them. We don't really see any animals there, we just talk about the mountains. Again, we'll focus more on mountains in a later episode, but it's good to highlight that because it's going to be a part of the series later on. We see the steppe in Asia, and here we focus on the Pallas's cat. So the Pallas's cat sequence is kind of one of the more light-hearted ones. To be honest, it's one of the ones I like the least from the episode, because this is more targeted towards the audience that kind of just want to look at cute animals, or people that are obsessed with cats, basically. It's this really miserable looking cat. Amber even says, oh, it's the grumpiest cat in the world. But it is interesting seeing the Pallas's cat. You see it basically walking along, and because it loses heat very quickly in its legs, it's got to shake them a lot whilst it's hunting, which is interesting, but that is kind of overshadowed by how kind of silly the sequence is, so it's fine. And then we move further north, we move to Siberia, we see the Siberian tiger. This sequence is great. Again, we just see a Siberian tiger walking through the forest looking for prey, but it's filmed in such a way that is very good. For starters, the Siberian tiger looks massive. I think the fact that we know it's the biggest cat is something you kind of take for granted. No, the tigers here looked huge. It showed you how difficult it was to be a tiger in this forest, because it's hunting all these animals, but they've all left the area months ago. I like how they had camera traps that showed you the prey animals, like wild boar or bears even, and the tigers arriving months after they've left when there's snow. I think it was actually really interesting watching the tigers actually try to get the bears. That was really good. The black bear's obviously hibernating, and it kind of knows the tigers are after it, because it's obviously managed to get itself pretty far into the hole, so the tiger can't go after it. That was interesting, because you don't really think a tiger has been able to take on bears, maybe fight them, but not necessarily hunt them, so that was very interesting. Again, the tiger sequence was great, it looked really good. It didn't show you a lot, but on a narrative level it was very good. We then get a brief look at the Aurora Borealis. That's something that's been filmed so many times before, and it always looks great. I mean, it looks great here, but it's always looked great. So I didn't add anything new to that, so that was fine. And then we move to the tundra. Here we see muskoxen. Again, another animal we've seen a lot in these kind of series, but here we do see something different. We see the muskoxen, they've got all their calves, it's nice, and then a bear goes after them. So we've seen muskoxen getting hunted a lot of times before, but almost always by Arctic wolves, and the way they deal with the two different predators could not be more different. With Arctic wolves, you kind of get a sense that they'll stand a chance. They can basically just huddle themselves around their calves and protect them. But here, no, can't really do that. A bear's massive, and the muskox just run. There's nothing they can really do. And what's really, I'm not going to say good about that sequence, but actually pretty almost sick, is how the calves are basically left behind because they can't keep up with the parents, and the bear just slaughters them all. It is a proper massacre, and I actually do respect them quite a bit for actually showing this, because it's pretty hard to watch. It's easily the hardest sequence to watch in this episode. What's really disturbing is that all these calves at the end, because they're so young, they can't actually differentiate the bear from their mothers, so they basically just run right up to the bear thinking it's their mum, and the bear just obviously kills them on the spot. Really hard to watch, really sick. was not nice to look at, but it was very impactful when I watched it the first time, and it's still impactful now. You see the one calf getting away and it manages to find its mum again. I sometimes feel in these sequences when the calf does find its mum again after it's been separated, it doesn't feel as realistic, but in this particular sequence, I was very much rooting for the calf to find its mum again, and I think if it hadn't, the sequence would not have worked as well. Because you'd just seen something so horrific, you needed a happy ending, so glad we got it. Then we move into the high Arctic. Here we see hooded seals, an animal we don't see very often. We saw them in Blue Planet and in Life of Mammals, and here it's great. Again, it's nice to see them again. You see two males fighting, and the male that wins obviously gets access to the females. However, the females aren't really interested in them. I think that's quite fun. It was quite a funny sequence. Again, hooded seals look pretty silly. They've obviously got that massive inflatable membrane in their nose, which just looks really comedic. It's pretty funny to watch. And again, watching the male get chased off by the female was pretty funny. So I did enjoy that sequence. Again, an animal you don't see very often. Then we move on to talk about climate change. We talk about all the glaciers melting. We've seen that before, but it always looks spectacular. It looks no less spectacular here. And the last bit of footage we get are the polar bears. Obviously, we were going to get polar bears. We see a mother and two more grown-up cubs. They're basically having to deal with this changing world. The ice is obviously melting. The mother is struggling to hunt. We see her going after a bearded seal. Doesn't work out. She also goes after a hooded seal. And we also talk about how they're actually a bit more formidable. Because they're quite funny to look at, you kind of don't realise they probably are a harder catch for polar bears. They're pretty big. And again, it's a good sequence. And I think the end of the episode is very effective. We basically show the mother polar bear lying on the ice, looking into the water, and you see a reflection. It's very effective at communicating, without saying too much, the negative effects of climate change on the polar bears. And then we see the diaries. It's all about the people filming the glaciers. That's really good. You just kind of see how trial and error it is, and how frustrating it must be to film this. It's kind of a roulette if you're going to be able to film it. There's a lot of fog. It's very effective, and yeah, it's a pretty good sequence. Yeah, this episode is very good. I very much enjoyed it. I think it's a very good opening to the series. I think from memory, it's one of the best episodes of the series. Pretty much everything in the episode is pretty good. The only weak link for me was the Palace's cat. Highlights for me, I think, were probably the orcas. The muskox and the bear was great. The polar bears at the end. To be honest with you, it's hard to press. Everything in here was pretty great. So yeah, I really liked this episode. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode. What were your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, next week I'll be doing the next one, which is all about the Arctic Ocean. So look forward to that. And yeah, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next week, and goodbye.